And just to welcome Niki Werkheiser, who is from the NASA STMD, and she is the program manager for the Advanced Technology Maturation and the lead for the Lunar Surface Innovation Initiative. And so we want, thank you again, Niki, and we're really excited for this fantastic update.
Thanks so much, Jorge. I just want to do a quick audio check. Jorge, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. You never know in this virtual environment. It's always like
yes.
Welcome, everyone, and we can go on to the first slide. Thank you for that introduction, and good morning. I am thrilled to be here today to talk with you about some of the new and innovative lunar surface technologies that we are developing, and we can go to the next slide. Jump right in. Okay, I'm sure you've been keeping up with Artemis, and we are very much focused on going to the moon. While Mars does remain our horizon goal, we first set our sights on exploring more of the moon than ever before with human and robotic explorers. So ahead of the human return, we will send a suite of science instruments and technology demonstrations, which is what we'll focus on a lot today, through commercial moon deliveries through the CLIPS program, which you'll hear me talk some about, and I think is very important and fundamental to what we're doing. We will find and use water and other critical resources needed for our long-term exploration. We will learn how to live and operate on the surface of another celestial body where astronauts are just 3 days away from home. And of course, we need to prove these technologies out. We need to do this before sending astronauts to Mars, which can be up to a 3-year round trip. So, and then the second phase there you see, we will lay the foundation for a sustained long-term presence on the lunar surface. And we will use the moon to validate our deep space systems and our operations before embarking on the human voyage to Mars. We could talk for a long time about what sustainable or sustained means, and I'm sure many of us have. But today, I think what I like to say for LSII is we focus a lot on developing that basic infrastructure that we need. And I think sometimes infrastructure can be a little less controversial or emotional word when we talk about where we need to start. And we're going to do all of this in collaboration with industry, academia, and our international partners. And you'll hear that theme throughout the talk today because it is really a fundamental tenet of what we're doing. We can go to the next slide. So today I'm going to really focus my talk on sharing what we're doing in NASA's Space Tech Mission Directorate to meet these objectives. So in Space Tech, our mantra is technology drives exploration. And we identify and develop those needed novel technologies that are required for space missions. So we work across our NASA mission directorates with Science Mission Directorate and the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate quite closely in this planning. Our programs in Space Tech are really aligned along the technology readiness spectrum. So we start, of course, with low TRL, that's in our early stage innovation program. This area, as you might imagine, focuses heavily on R&D. And requires engaging directly with universities across the nation. And then we have our mid-TRL areas, which we call our technology maturation program. That's what I'm director of. And this is the area that I love because it can be viewed really as kind of the bridge between the early stage R&D and the mission or commercial infusion into actual missions. So kind of that, you hear people refer to that mid-TRL as the valley of death, and I like being that bridge. So we get to take the initial concepts to full prototypes. And then finally, the end goal, of course, is to evolve these high TRL technologies in our technology demo missions, demo missions program, I should say, which are focused on mission and or commercial infusion. So this area works a lot with industry and engineering implementation into the actual mission. And as you can see on this chart, we have multiple capability development areas captured there in the bubbles and then that list that you see. And they're shown along our themes, which are go, land, live, and explore. So go, we focus on expanding rapid, safe, and efficient space transportation. In land, we focus on expanding access to diverse surface destinations. Live focuses on sustainable living and then working farther from Earth. And finally, explore with a focus on transformative missions and discoveries. So the LSII, the Lunar Surface Innovation Initiative capability areas that we'll focus on today really align with live and explore. Although I will say dust mitigation is ultimately cross-cutting across all or most of these. And so we do work across and coordinate, of course, with all of our stakeholders within our mission directorate and across the mission directorate, and then with our external stakeholders as well. Okay, so we go to the next slide. So to give you a little history on LSII, it was initiated in 2019 as a high priority in the President's budget request, and with the objective really of formulating and coordinating a technology development portfolio which would accelerate the technologies needed for lunar surface exploration. So while we might have had programs and projects going on with, in each of these kind of areas, integrating those and having a portfolio and a roadmap of how we were going to get there and develop these into high TRL capabilities is really the intent. As I mentioned earlier, and very importantly, a key tenet of LSI from day one has been to execute this with robust collaboration across industry, academia, and government. So you'll hear me reiterate that throughout the status over and over. I'm very passionate about that, and that's one of the primary reasons that we do have the consortium and that we have the focus groups and then these workshops. We don't want to just have the biannual reviews where we just meet a couple years and talk, every couple times a year and talk. We want to have a regular, consistent dialogue and communication where we're really identifying gaps and key themes, and really where industry or universities are investing energy and resources so that we can calibrate our solicitations and opportunities more toward that. So since it was initiated, we have established and grown, of course, this consortium. We have formulated and integrated technology maturation activities really across that TRL pipeline that I referenced, and thus across a broad range of our space tech programs. And we've done a lot of this by leveraging innovative challenges, collaborations, and acquisition strategies. So really that whole toolkit, and I'll talk about that throughout here as well. And lastly, but importantly, I do want to touch on how we're utilizing that early uncrewed surface flight opportunities through the commercial lunar payload services to really inform our key technology and infusion, and having access to those early on is very important. So at the bottom of the chart there, you'll see the 6 technology areas for LSII. If we, through this initiative, can develop what I often refer to as the pipes and roads for these capabilities, that infrastructure, then I think we can truly reach sustainability and also open up the commercial market on the moon, as well as meet our national goals for successfully testing out these capabilities that we also do need for Mars. And so if we pull on those threads a little bit, we have in situ resource utilization, and I'll touch on these a little bit, which is how we're going to obviously use the resources on the moon surface to get consumables for astronauts and propellants for our rockets. And then we can use those same resources in conjunction with additive construction and excavation technology to build structures like landing pads and possibly even habitats. Of course, we do all of these things. To do these things, you must have power and the ability to store energy. So we're developing fission surface power, regenerative fuel cells, solar arrays, and other novel technologies. And then in order to do all of these things, you really have to be able to survive, obviously, this extreme environment on the moon. And we have to be able to enable rovers and manipulators and other systems to operate within those extreme conditions on the surface. And then speaking of those rovers, you have to be able to access these areas. So in extreme access, we're developing small scouts and rovers that access the areas that really may be too dangerous for humans, such as permanently shadowed regions where we believe there's a lot of water and other resources. And of course, dust mitigation. We have to be able to deal with dust on the moon. I always tease and say we don't call it dust solutions, we call it mitigation, because that's exactly what we have to do. And this does require new technologies. As we all know here, when the Apollo astronauts went to the moon, we didn't really have a good understanding of the regolith. We learned a lot through those missions, and that these particles can really wreak havoc on spacesuits and other equipment. And so we're really investing early as possible in developing these new technologies. So you can see how each of these capability areas are critical both individually as well as how they work together to develop really an interdisciplinary ecosystem that we need for sustainable missions. So I'll touch a little bit on efforts in each of these, but I wanted to mention that kind of interdependency and connection, because that's another reason I think that having the individual focus groups and then having workshops where we bring together kind of the cross-cutting aspects of these capabilities is really key. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And I'm just going to hit on the very highlights of these, and wanted to have these in the package, but they'll be talked about a lot more today, and particularly dust mitigation, which is what we're here to focus on. And so Michael and others will be talking about that in more detail. But obviously, as Jorge mentioned, we are developing active, passive, and operational technologies to mitigate these dust hazards. You can see a list there of the technology developments underway. As I mentioned, these do span the TRL, so you'll see there at the bottom, there was a new 2020 SBIR topic that Michael was the topic manager for, that included optical systems, thermal surfaces, fabric, seals, and soft goods and mechanisms. And we did not have an SBIR topic previously. And then we also have university collaborations, such as our early stage innovations. And we just selected the 2021 the Breakthrough Innovative Game Changing, or BIG, Idea Challenge. We had 7 university teams there. I'm hoping some of them are here today. I think we just announced that last Friday. Michael will talk more about that. And then you can see over on the right some of the key development areas. Since we're going to talk this so much today, I'm not going to read those to you, and I'll save that for others to talk about. We can go to the next slide. I'll just touch briefly on some of the other areas. In situ resource utilization, we talked about what that really means. We do have early CLIPS demos. Those early lunar missions are planned. We have 2 to 3 of those planned that will lead ultimately to an ISRU pilot plant demonstration, which is an integrated scalable system for collecting consumables on the lunar surface. And then methods for size sorting and the lunar regolith, and then methods for measuring mineral properties and oxygen content before and after processing. So we have a pretty comprehensive portfolio now with ISRU and integrating those systems and processes. We go to the next slide. And the next area is sustainable surface power. Obviously, this is one that's very important to everyone. As a matter of fact, our fall LSIC meeting had a sustainable surface power theme throughout, and breakout sessions where we talked about power needs. We really focused in 3 categories here: power generation, power management and distribution, and energy storage. And so for our key development areas, we have fission surface power, 10 kilowatt equivalents, a lot of work and activity going on there, as well as deployable solar arrays, which are really important that we have redundant and or dissimilar capabilities. So in power, we actually have a pretty broad range of capabilities, including the solar arrays, fission surface power, and then some mid-TRL other areas that we're developing, like chemical heat integrated systems, for example. And then power needed for the foundational habitat is met with that 10 kilowatt fission surface power. But like I said, we do want to have redundant and dissimilar systems and not just depend on one technology. Regenerative fuel cells, and then power transmission, cabling, converters, regulators, and switch gears. So this is a very big area. We actually, with deployable solar arrays right now, are in the process of selecting a recent solicitation for vertical solar array technologies, and that should be announced in the springtime. We go to the next slide. And then, of course, extreme environments, which we could talk about for a long time, and we'll talk about a lot here as part of depth mitigation. The moon is an extreme environment, as we all know. Conditions are pretty harsh, and so developing all of these technologies to be able to operate within those conditions can be challenging. And so this is another area where we're planning for several early demos, and there's a lot of development going on now to enable rovers, manipulators, and other systems. And then we also are working to generate and publish an external environment users guide. There really isn't one right now. There's a lot of different types of documents. There's, of course, our natural environment documents, but there's not an integrated kind of user's guide similar to what's been produced for depth mitigation as well. All right, so go to the next slide. And then,
Niki, we just have about a minute left. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to flip through these. So extreme access, I won't spend a long time on this, but obviously we have to really develop these robust, sustained surface activities and extended operations in those permanently shadowed regions that I mentioned. So navigation with minimal infrastructure, autonomous operations is really key and important to these capabilities. And we have a lot of activities going on there that I won't go into detail on here, but so the next slide. And then finally, excavation and construction. This, of course, we work a lot with ISRU in this area. Excavation of hard regolith and ice material, long duration operation of mechanisms is a challenge we're working on. And then you'll see the autonomy theme throughout here, really increasing the overall autonomy with reliability of these operations. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. I just want to show real quickly here. I did want to talk for a minute. Ultimately, these activities lead to flight technology demos. I mentioned the commercial Lunar payload services that offers the early opportunities that we need. This shows our current LSI plan for the key technology demos that we need to perform, and you can see the desk mitigation line there. This includes a combination of collaborations and partnerships across industry and academia and NASA. And then really our goal here, if you see these demos, is to retire the primary technology hurdles of a given capability at the relevant scale. So we spend a lot of time talking about what that relevant scale is. And so our goal is that while there may be additional engineering development required for scaling up these capabilities, there really shouldn't be any more required for the major foundational technologies themselves. So we have to start testing these things in this relevant environment of the moon early on these missions to see if they perform as expected. And if not, because we're going to have lessons learned, have time to infuse these lessons to these technologies before they're integrated in fully scaled systems for missions and or commercial infusion. I know I'm running out of time. I'm almost done. We're in the last chart. Next slide. Give me the last chart here. And did want to say just briefly, if I keep mentioning, it's very important that we work with all of our stakeholders on this and throughout the development. That's very important to me because it's any large agency, we can be guilty of groupthink, and we don't want to get too immersed in that or married to singular development paths. So we've developed really a keen sense of combining flexibility and agile planning and pairing those internal and external resources in ways that leverage our relative government, industry, and university strengths. And so that's why, again, I encourage all of you that are involved today that are spending your time through these focus group and activities to give real tangible feedback on areas where you feel like you could do more or where we need to be offering more opportunities for public-private partnerships or different platforms. We do use really a spectrum of platforms, our tipping points, crowdsourcing. We have continual challenges that are open now, SBIRs, NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts, the NIACs, and then multiple space grant platforms as well. So I encourage you all to go to the website at the bottom, and you can see there what our currently open opportunities are and then future upcoming opportunities. You can see on the chart, as I'm very proud to say, that within just a little over a year of being established, LSI has engaged 390 organizations across 44 states and Puerto Rico, and we're going to continue